Hi, I'm Nicolette Lee. I'm the creator of HOKKIEN for Beginners. My story is about a girl called Kara. She's unable to understand Chinese and dialect and sees Hokkien as abstract shapes instead of words. So as her grandmother's health begins to deteriorate, Kara has to piece together meaning from the Hokkien language and the life of a woman she can't understand. I first started when I was about 10. In primary school, I'd make these small booklets. They were comics about two sister characters. They were just obviously me and my sister, but they were very small booklets. They were held together with staples, and I distribute them in school. So I was really inspired by Dav Pilkey. He had this series of comic books about Captain Underpants, and the children in them, they were these two boys. They made their own comics. It made me realize the barriers for entry to make comics weren't that high. I was a huge fan of Neil Gaiman growing up. He has this ability to integrate the fantastic with the mundane, and it's something that still lingers with me. And there's Sean Tan's work, Tales from Outer Suburbia, The Arrival. There's this tactile quality to what he draws. So he makes things like mysterious robots flying mountains. They look real, tangible. But one thing I really like is his ability to tie all of that into like real, honest human emotion about immigration, about moving into a new place, feeling like a stranger. So in the end, I like to mix the fantastic with the mundane, and that's always been my goal. Well, I was definitely inspired by my own frustration with learning Chinese and dialect, especially because I spent a lot of time with my grandparents who only spoke dialect. So the character of Kara definitely embodies that. Some external influences I do have are early newspaper comics. So we had Calvin and Hobbes, Baby Blues, and there was McKay's Little Nemo. Back then, there was this tradition to represent abstract concepts like swearing, but also dreamscapes, baby speech as images in speech bubbles. So when it came time to do the comic, I immediately knew that was how I wanted to represent sound. For visual research, I really went back to my childhood. I literally went back to the HDB block I grew up in and where I'd been raised by my grandparents, and I went there to sketch the void deck. And of course, I also ended up watching like many how to speak Hokkien beginner YouTube tutorials. When I found out the theme of the anthology was sound, I wanted to represent sound in a visual medium. And my first thought was to tell a story using images and speech bubbles instead of words. And having grown up without the ability to understand my grandparents who speak in dialect, that sort of frustration tied together with the format I wanted to make. And it came together in this story about our ability to understand meaning through sound. I definitely think there's a massive amount of information and inspiration that will die with our older generation's dialect if we don't make an attempt to reach out. We have massive amounts of cinema, television, and radio plays entirely in dialect, and we have to make a concerted effort to preserve that for future generations. The story is an exercise in portraying that frustration and self-doubt that comes with being monolingual. If it had a moral or a message, it would be that being monolingual or having learning difficulties doesn't kill your ability to understand or your capacity for love. Well, that ties into the issue of representation. Sometimes there are aspects of living in Southeast Asia that are inherently unique to the region. So we want to preserve our culture, or at least our experiences, for the greater world and future generations. Well, I think our current comic creator scene is rather insular. There are a handful of creators and a couple of publishers. If you want to get your work out there, it's normally through these fixed channels which can be hard to break into. I'd like to see the scene expand, especially with webtoons and webcomics. These lower the barriers for entry and make it easier for younger creators to find a voice. Thanks so much for your time watching this video.